back to my channel. In today's video we are going to do a twofer. So we are going to get 2 cards out of one process or method or technique. So I have been all about saving time lately, and this is not really saving me a whole lot of time. It took me several days to do this amidst not being able to get up here and craft at all, and kids and life. So I showed you some dies. I purchased those off of Amazon. I don't actually end up using those. That was my original intent, but I didn't actually use them. I have a honeybee stamp here. This is, wait for it, In Full Bloom. And then I have this Simon Says stamp. This is Thankful Flowers. And then I have some Paper Studio white cardstock. I have Die Cuts Love paper, or that is possibly Simon Says stamp pink cardstock. And I have some Paper Studio black cardstock. The black and the pink are going to be my card bases for today. And the white panels I'm showing you here, I've actually cut down to 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm going to use that to mat that black card base so that I don't have to use some specialty pen to write on it. So that's why I have those 2 panels. Those are not necessarily part of the technique. They're just what I'm using to mat the inside of the card. For the main focal image for today's video, we are going to use the Simon Says stamp. This is Delicate Outline Flowers. This is a beautiful background, and my intent was to color this with colored pencils, but do selective coloring. Because there is a lot of flowers here, I was like, well, I'll leave the flowers white and I'll just color in the leaves because that'll save me time. But as I got going, my ideas changed, and I didn't necessarily feel like there was enough color. I felt it was very pale, very bland, and not very interesting, and it looked weird. It looked like I didn't complete my card, and I didn't want to do that. So here I'm showing you a case. I purchased this off of Amazon. I thought it was really beautiful. This holds all of my colored pencils. It has 4 different compartments. It's very large, but it's very pretty. It has tons and tons of room. So I'm going to be using my Fabre Castille colored pencils today. I had polychromos in almost all of the colors, and then I had this set here that you're seeing. I eventually got rid of, and when I say got rid of, I mean I gave them to my daughter, my almost 12-year-old. I gave them to her just because they were nicer, a step up from a Crayola, but they are so soft, and I just really struggled with them. I could get a really sharp tip, but I would break it. And it was just, after using these Fabre Castille, which are considerably more expensive than a polychromos, and definitely more expensive than like a Crayola, I just discovered that I preferred my Fabre Castille, even though I had more colors, and I'm all about having all of the colors and all of the things. It just was not practical to, and kind of selfish to keep a hold of those, even though I didn't really like them and I didn't really use them very often. So I did give those to my daughter. Here I'm showing you some watercolor pencils I have, and I have a video planned in the probably very distant future where I will be using these. But this is still part of that same case, and it has a spot to hold like your blending stumps and your sandpaper thing to clean off your blending stumps. And all of those kind of accessories that come with all of these pens, or this could hold markers. I just use it to hold my colored pencils. So I have a piece of Paper Studio cardstock here. Now I typically use, if I'm going to do ink blending or alcohol markers or foiling, pretty much any other technique outside of watercoloring and Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, I use my Hammermill cardstock. But Hammermill cardstock is very, very smooth. And when you're doing colored pencil coloring, you need to have a paper that has a little bit of tooth, meaning it has a little bit of texture. Not quite the texture of like a watercolor paper, but more texture than like an ultra smooth cardstock. So I have this Paper Studio cardstock in my stash, and that is what I used. I know that there are papers out there that are for actual pencil coloring, but I don't have that. I'm just using what I have. I don't use my colored pencils enough to justify the cost of getting a paper that is strictly for that. So I just use what I have. So I did cut that paper down to 6x6, just because I felt like that would give me a little bit of wiggle room to mount this red rubber stamp. And I did put that in my little Tim Holtz stamping positioner and tried desperately not to whack the camera when I did this. And I stamped that using my Gina K Amalgum ink. The reason why I use that ink is because it dries fast, but it's not going to bleed or smudge when I color pencil color over this. So we're going to end up speeding this up considerably, but this is real-time coloring right here. So like I said, my intent was to color in maybe the centers of the flowers and all of the greenery, and then leave the flowers white. But with this stamp, there is a lot of flowers, and that is partly what drew me to this background stamp, is all of the beautiful florals. But as I colored it, I discovered that it just looked incomplete. It looked like I did not finish my card. And so I do end up taking more time and actually coloring all of these florals in. Like I said, that was not my original intent. My intent was to kind of have some selective coloring, but this card adapted as it went along. It changed, it evolved, just because that's kind of how it goes sometimes. I have a general plan in mind, a general idea, but it always kind of morphs, and that's okay. That's part of the creative process. That's part of the enjoyment of creating, and so I was okay with it. In order to color that, I did kind of swatch out some colors off to the side here. I am not an expert in pencil coloring. I'm just not. I would be lying to you 110% if I said I was. And you can tell by the final product. It is good for me, but it is not professional. It is not realistic. It is not like super high quality fine art, but it is good for me. And it was nice for me to just have some time to kind of zone out and color. Sometimes I crave that. Not very often. Coloring is typically not my jam, but sometimes I do crave just the chance to color. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things that I have learned by watching people that are actually good at this or have practiced it far more than I have. So one of the tricks to coloring with pencils is you have to build the color. So you have to go in layers. If you are discovering that you have colored a couple leaves in or a flower or two and your hand hurts, you're applying way too much pressure. Unless you have some sort of medical condition, you're probably applying way too much pressure. So a light hand. You're going to build layers, and that will give you dimension, that will give you coverage, that will cover up pencil strokes, that will make it look more complete and more professional. It will give you a much nicer image if you actually do it in layers. If you grind your pencil down into the paper from the word go, you're not going to be able to build color, so you're not going to be able to build depth very well, and your hand is going to hurt to boot. So very light pressure. And that was one of the things that I discovered was good for me in switching over to these pencils, is not only is the tip harder, the actual coloring material, I guess, is harder, but I was able to be more conscious of my pressure with those. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I was able to be a little more conscious of my pressure. So I went through and I put, my greens down. I tried to put a darker color where I thought it would be darker, and then try to quote unquote blend it out with a lighter color. But like I said, I am not good at this. This is me practicing. So I still have pencil strokes. So one of the things that helps me is a blending stump and Gamsol. Gamsol is just essentially mineral spirits, and you use a paper blending stump to help, I don't want to say blur your coloring, but you're kind of, for lack of better words, spreading that color around so that the pencil strokes disappear. They melt together better. So it was at this point that I was like, man, this doesn't look, it just looks unfinished. There's not enough greenery to make it to where I don't have to color in these flowers. So with the flowers, what I'm doing is the same thing that I did with the leaves. I'm just going through and applying my darkest color where either 2 points meet, or where something lays on top of the other, or where the illustrator has put in maybe a dip or a fold, where the illustrator has put in lines that show where there should be shading. And then I go in with my next color. I did a 3-color blend. These florals are fairly large. There's quite a bit of real estate on each of them. So I probably could have used more colors to get even further depth. But again, this is me practicing. This is me just kind of exploring this medium. So I only stuck with, no, I did use 4. My bad. I did use 4. My bad. You could have used even more, but 4 was good enough for me as far as getting, I started out with 3, but I do end up using 4. 4 was enough for me to have kind of the depth I wanted. So here I applied that first layer, and I thought, okay, I need more depth. So here I come in with a 4th color, and this is just a very deep magenta. And that helped considerably to give more depth. As I kept going, I got better and I learned more, and I was able to apply more layers. And so this first flower sticks out like a sore thumb as I got going. And so I end up going back and applying more layers to this. I think when it was all said and done, in order to get the depth and the dimension and the coverage that I wanted, I think I end up applying like 4 layers or more to each of these flowers. So this is just with a couple layers, and it looked okay. But as you can tell, now that all the coloring is done, I do believe I applied anywhere between 3 and 4 layers or more to each of those flowers. Just again, a light pressure each time. So I wanted this to have more of a bold outline. So I did keep my stamp inside my stamp positioning tool here from Tim Holtz. And I just put it back up into that bottom left-hand corner. And here I have VERSAFINE Onyx Black ink, which is my favorite ink as far as getting a very crisp, deep, dark, rich black. So I just applied that over. And one of the things, and I don't know what it is, but in my experience, red rubber stamps give you incredible detail. Photopolymer are becoming more and more popular, and these red rubbers are kind of going away, but, or there's few of them. I shouldn't say they're going away. There's just few of them on the market. But they give you such incredible detail. I had one spot that I was really struggling to get it to stamp right, and it's this floral, this kind of the stamens and pistils of the floral kind of in the middle right here, right where I'm pushing right now. I just was really struggling to get that to come to stamp cleanly, but I finally got it. So I just think that this adds such depth, that this really, just applying this deep rich black really helped kind of hide any mistakes in my coloring, and just really helped to bring this all together. So because this Onyx Black ink is a pigment ink, I did end up going and heat setting this. You could have used like a clear embossing powder over it. I chose not to. I just took my heat gun and heat set that ink until I could tell that it was dry, because it will smudge. And I knew I was going to kind of trim off these edges and these borders, and I really did not want to smudge this coloring. Like I said, this took me, I think, 5 days to do, and not because it literally takes me a day to color each flower, but because of life and family and taking care of other things, and I wasn't able to work on it every day for the amount of time that I would like to. So all I did was trim off the edges, just to get me like just the straight picture, just the straight colored image. And now I'm going to bring in some of my card bases that I made. And when I first started to do this, my intent was to get 2 cards, but I was going to use that die set to cut out a shape, but that didn't work out. So like I said, these cards really did kind of morph and adapt as I went along. So I cut that one part to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, just to kind of see. I thought maybe I'd just leave it as a full panel. I thought that was really pretty, but I was like, no, I really want to kind of have this at a border, at an angle on the card. So this is me just kind of playing and figuring out how I want to do what. So I've decided where I want things to go. So all I've done is kind of place my panel on my card base, and I flipped it over and I'm putting pencil lines, and I'm just going to use my paper trimmer to eventually cut that off. And then I'll glue that down. So this is where I want this one. And I think that looks really, really pretty. So for this other one, I am going to leave it in a strip. And I just kind of played on where I wanted that to go. I did decide that needed, because this is going to go on the pink card base, I did decide that needed some sort of mat or border around it. So all I did was take a scrap piece of black cardstock. This is still the same Paper Studio cardstock, and I matted that and used my trimmer to kind of cut around that. And that helps that floral border stand out a little more. In order to make sure that I was trying to keep that whole angle diagonal theme going. And so I could have just kind of put that right in the middle or along the bottom and been able to preserve some more of that coloring I did, but I really wanted this angle. So here I'm taking that Simon Says stamp, can't remember what it's called, but I told you in the beginning, that, and just trying to figure out which sentiments I want to go with what image. I glued both of those colored panels down flat to the card. This one, I felt like it needed some shine and some sparkle, so I took some gold foil cardstock from Paper Studio, cut off a 1/4 inch strip, and I'm adhering that right at the bottom of that border. And that was a really good finishing touch there. Here I took an image from that Simon Says stamp set, and I used my golden glitz, my Delicata golden glitz ink, and I just re-inked that ink pad. And I got a little carried away. And so the N, the I, and the G, ING are kind of blurred. And I'm going to show you how I fix that later. So here I'm just trimming off the excess of the strip that I put at a diagonal. And then I will go ahead and put down my sentiment for this one. For this one, I used a sentiment from the Honeybee stamp, and I just stamped that in the same VERSAFINE Onyx Black ink, kind of at the bottom right-hand corner. Now, because this one, I got a little carried away and I wasn't patient and let my ink sink in, it did blur the lines a little bit, so I just took a black Sharpie marker and am coloring in black where the openings should have been for a lot of these letters. And that's how I'm fixing that. And is it perfect? No. Does it get the job done? Yes. To finish both cards off, I added some sequins in gold and black, and then that finishes both of these cards. So I appreciate you spending some time with me today. I hope you learned something. I hope you're willing to give this a try, and give yourself some grace and realize that sometimes our cards have to adapt, and what we originally set out is not necessarily how they end up, and that's a-okay. So I hope you enjoyed, and until then, we will see you next time. Bye.